We turn now to this afternoon's major, although not terribly surprising, defence announcement. The government is to purchase 4 Boeing P-8 Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft from the United States at a cost of somewhere in the region of $2.3 billion. The planes are to replace 6 Orions, which have been updated but do date back to the 1960s. Why the P-8s as a replacement? Well, I spoke to Defence Minister Ron Mark shortly before we came on air.
Well, I have to start, John, by saying that I was a bit of a P-8 sceptic when I came into the government. In fact, anyone can go back and look at New Zealand First Defence Policy, and you'd probably the first thing you'd spot is that we were talking about the Seahawk in those days. But you get into government, you get a lot more information available to you. I'm not one to mark someone else's homework. I prefer to do my own work. And so we went right back to the start of the case and looked at all the arguments for and against. We looked at the various options that were available, and obviously the 3 options that met the requirement in terms of providing a large manned aircraft came down to the Boeing, the Kawasaki P-1, and the Lockheed Martin Seahawk. The problem is the Seahawk was a conceptual design. It hasn't been actually produced in this role, and the Kawasaki P-1 is still developmental.
What sort of pressures did you come on under from the USA to take these planes? They use them. Australia is acquiring them from 20. Actually, they're acquiring 15, aren't they? The UK is acquiring them from 2019. Canada has an ageing fleet of Auroras that are considered to be sort of doomed about 2025, and there's pressure on them to use the P-8s. This is a Five Eyes aircraft, isn't it?
Well, you're pretty well informed, John, so I congratulate you on that. I guess it's fair to say that compatibility and interoperability are 2 fundamental principles that a sensible government would look to try and follow. But to be honest, if it was a case of looking fresh at the options, looking at what was available in terms of funding, but more importantly, looking at actual capability, what they deliver, what was also very important is the ability to support the aircraft through whole of life. And when you start looking at the number of airframes actually in the air, like the community or the family that's out there operating, that becomes very important because it tends to validate or otherwise the performance projections and the maintenance record. So when you're dealing with about 158 odd aircraft, I think it's 150 out there or due to be out there, you actually get a clear actual maintenance history in front of you. And people can project all they like, but it's actually what turns up on the day and what you see unfolding that means anything. For aircraft that are experimental, where there's only 23 being contracted to be built, they haven't all actually been built, and they're all being bought by the same country that's making them, tends to paint a picture. And you cannot go past the fact that America has invested $9 billion in developing this capability and testing it. You also can't go past recognizing the strengths and the advantages of buying into an airframe that brings with it all future upgrades and modifications, what they term these days as the spiral upgrade option. So you're future-proofing yourself in terms of capability, and you're buying into a well-developed capability that's had a hell of a lot of money invested in it.
Absolutely. And look, all of that is true. I mean, this is a plane that has had an enormous amount of money spent on it in research and development. But you're also keeping your mates happy, aren't you? I mean, the United States wanted New Zealand to take the P-8s, didn't they?
Yeah, but I've got to say to you, John, I mean, I've met with Secretary of Defence Jim Mathis on numerous occasions. I've chatted to him informally and in formal talks. There's no pressure of New Zealand, you must buy this aircraft. Sweaty, that has not been my experience to date. I think people recognise that New Zealand has an independence of mind. I think Ron Mark has a bit of a reputation of being an independence of mind. For me, it's about making sure that we do not repeat the mistakes of past New Zealand governments when it comes to the procurement of military capability, where we buy into something that's new in concept, that is still evolving, that is experimental, and doesn't actually have a track record against which you can judge it. I've got to say, John, I think I've probably been the strongest critic of defence procurement over the last 20 years, and I was not about to fall down that same rabbit hole myself.
Can I just say 2 words? Chinese submarines. How important was the capacity for this plane to track submarines and, if the proverbial is hitting the fan, actually fire anti-sub missiles at them.
Well, at the end of the day, John, you're buying a warfighting capability, and this is a capability that once it gets introduced into service in 2023, will be still flying when I'm dead. I cannot project what this country might be facing 30 years from now, 25 years from now. So it's irresponsible of me to put up an option that neutralises, denudes our military warfighting capability. So submarine hunting, anti-submarine warfare is something that New Zealand has always, a capability we've always had. We have it currently. It's interesting, we have been winners of the Finn-class trophy time and time again, demonstrating to the world that we're one of the best in that space. I guess it comes down to catering for the need, and we've done that. So it is definitely a capability we've purchased with a mind to the aircraft performing a military function. And I'm confident, but that's not all the aircraft does. In terms of environmental protection, HADAR operations, search and rescue, I think the great strength that I see in this aircraft is the speed at which it will get into a search area, the amount of water that it will be able to cover. We're talking 1,200 nautical miles with about 4-hour loiter time over target. New Zealand has a search and rescue responsibility for an 11th of the globe's surface, from the South Pole to the equator. Our search and rescue responsibility, our HADAR responsibility is massive, and so we have to buy the right capability to meet that need.
Number 5 Squadron is going to move from Whenuapai to Ohakea. Why is that? Is that about the weapons that these planes will be carrying?
It's twofold. Firstly, the ability to be able to take off with a full load of fuel is a factor. The ability to be able to weaponize the aircraft. I mean, you could always take it off from Whenuapai, partially laden with fuel, fly it down to Ohakea, weaponize it and refuel it again, then fly off on your mission. It's a terribly inefficient way of operating an aircraft. I have to go back to the previous government's considerations. They were actually considering closing Whenuapai, end of story, and moving everything to Ohakea. We're not going there. We don't subscribe to the view that you put all your aircraft in one basket. But the aircraft will perform better, will operate better if it's operating out of Ohakea. It's something that had been already planned as a move. This purchase confirms that we will make that move, but we'll still retain our tactical airlift capability out of Whenuapai and the support that goes with that. Plus, on top of that, I think we work the Sea Sprites and other things out of Whenuapai as well. And at the end of the day, you've got to have a north-based Air Force base. It doesn't make a lot of sense to have only one base. That would not be responsible.
Defence Minister Ron Mark